Okay, well, welcome to my studio. I have a backyard studio now. I was in Annapolis. I had a studio in Annapolis for 5 years and got tired of paying rent, so put a building in my backyard and in the process of getting it fitted out. But so right now I have a little space right here just to do this demonstration. And what I thought I would do first of all is give you some show you some pictures of furniture that I've sort of transformed. I'm going to get a little closer.
Hold the ones you're not showing.
So you'll have some inspiration for what I'm going to show you during the demonstration. Now these are some of these pictures are before and afters, and some are just pieces that I've done, but it'll give you an idea of, you know, you can look at a piece that you've had for a long time, and you can say, well, that really doesn't excite me anymore. I'd like to have that a different color. And sometimes it pains me greatly to paint natural wood because I grew up with a carpenter. My father was a carpenter and he loved wood. So sometimes it pains me to paint a piece of cherry furniture, but if it makes the person that is going to happy, I'll do it. Now this first one you can see is a rocker, and this was a very traditional family heirloom, but it no longer went with their decor, so they had me paint it and design this little centerpiece in a sort of Indian kind of, yeah, kind of a Indian kind of motif, so that it would go with their new decor. That was a rocking chair that I did. This piece I showed Patty and Kip when we first logged on. This is what it looked like when I bought it. I bought it off of Facebook Marketplace, and it was had all this rubber that had sort of eaten into the finish, and I made it into a kitchen island, and I finished the top to look like driftwood, and the top, since I made it into a kitchen island, the top has a food safe finish on it, so it can be used easily in a kitchen without worrying about it. And it looks like a whole different piece by the time you paint it and do something different to it. It's another piece that I found. This one, I love the wood, I love the inlay on it, but it was the finish itself was in really bad shape. So I used a gel stain on it and just stained it a darker color so that everything kind of disappeared. And this is called a spinet desk. It opens up like an old-time piano, like a very old piano, and it's a desk on the inside. This was, everybody probably has one of these. It's just an old dresser, not very exciting. And this person wanted some metallic and some design on it, so I fixed her up with all sorts of colors on that one. This is called a Chinese wedding cabinet, and it was red. And they didn't have any use for red in their house anymore, so I painted it blue and did a glazed finish on it, which is like a translucent finish that gives it a little more depth. And this was just a little console table that we were driving through Pennsylvania one day on our way home from New Jersey, and there was a little thrift shop, and I found this in there, and it was just like dark wood, you know, that nobody really wants in their house anymore. So I painted it and did a glazed finish on that. And actually the lady who is now the owner of Local by Design, where I have some of my artwork, it's not open yet, but have some of my artwork, she actually bought that for her hallway. This is a nightstand that was very orange and reddish looking, and it didn't go with their new decor, so I painted it I did a glazed finish on that and painted it so it would match their new decor. Becky McConkey when she moved, gave me this buffet. It was brown and dark and very oppressive looking, and I painted it I call it white on white. It's a sort of an off-white background and then very white detail on all of the intricate parts on it. And that one is actually in the window of Local by Design in Annapolis Mall right now.
You can buy it.
Yeah, this one is, this is a little music cabinet that I found for my daughter, for our daughter. It was this sort of, somebody had painted it this white color, and I'm going to go into a problem that I had with this a little later on. But anyway, I turned it into it. She wanted it to be a sort of a dark mahogany color, so I painted it and glazed it. And then on the inside, I painted it a color, so it would have a little more interest. And that's where I ran into the problem. I'll explain that to you in a little while.
How old was this one?
Yeah, it was probably from the early 1900s. This desk was very orange and didn't go with their decor, so I painted it black. I actually spray painted this. I had a sprayer and I spray painted that so it would have a nice, smooth, contemporary finish. This was an old oak dining room set that actually belongs to the gentleman who is the comptroller for Under Armour. His name is Jamie Bragg, and he asked that I paint a Maryland flag on the table. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's a Maryland flag on that table that I painted. And he has this on what he calls his crab patio. So I painted both of those to match, and that's in his house up in Arnold. And again, everybody has a dresser that, you know, you've had for years, and it doesn't really go with anything anymore. This one I did a metallic finish on. This was for a designer for some people who were having their whole master bedroom redone. This one is another one. This was sort of an orangish color, you know, that old pine. And a friend of mine needed something to put at her house at the beach. So she wanted it a beachy color. So we arrived with this really pretty blue, painted it blue, and then I did a glaze over that. And she took it to the beach.
You want this piece next?
A lot of times when I do work for an interior designer or for a client, I'll do a sketch or a sort of a prototype or sample for them to see. And this is a sample that I did for this particular piece that I was going to be working on. I gave her different options for what she could do with it. I knew the colors that she basically wanted, but I gave her options for as far as the design and everything goes. And this is what it looked like. This is what it looked like before. Can you see that well? And then this is what it looked like when I finished it.
Oh.
And I did hand painting. She asked for a hand painted design on the front, and then that's what I did on the top. And that was very metallic, very shiny. That's what she wanted. Speaking of metallic and shiny, I had been contacted by somebody to do, I do a lot of bathroom vanities. That seems to be the thing that people want to have redone these days. So I did, a lady had asked me if I would come and paint this vanity in her bathroom, or for her bathroom, and I said, sure. And then she decided that it was going to be too big. So she called me up and asked me if I would like to have it. So I said, sure, I'll take it. So I painted the vanity. It was white with all this French design on it. I painted it black. And I did a project in Dunkirk at Creations Hair Salon where I did a wall finish that had glass beads in it. And I had some of that product left over. So I used the glass beads on the top of the vanity. And then I sealed it with an epoxy pour-on sealer. So this vanity was all glitz and glamour, and somebody came and bought it and took it to Montgomery County. So, and someone had given me an old cedar chest that he had in his barn. and I painted it, and then I did artwork on the top of it.
That's cool.
So there are lots of options for things that you can do with furniture. It doesn't just have to be paint. These old antique doors, let's see, give me that sample. These old antique doors were going to be used as an art piece on a wall in a condo at the Ritz in Baltimore. I did this through a designer, and they had a vision, not that one, that little sample on top there, that's sitting right by those others. Anyway, these were dark and, you know, all crusty looking. Yeah, these were dark and crusty looking, and the designer and the homeowner had a vision for it, and this is the finish that I came up with. So that's what I ended up doing on those doors. And this was, I was talking to Patty earlier, this is what you call a layered finish. It's just different layers of paint over top of each other. And then not too long ago, up in Owings Mills, Maryland, I was driving up there every day. There was this monstrous built-in that was about 16 feet long and 12 feet tall. And they wanted it to be lighter and not so oppressive. So that's what me and a few other people ended up turning that into. It turned into a whole new piece, and the lady said she never realized it could look so good after we finished. So.
It's really pretty.
And I was saying earlier also, I started out doing this painting furniture thing by actually taking a class on painting kitchen cabinetry. I went down to North Carolina and I took a 3-day class on how to paint cabinets using this particular product. And my first experiment when I came back was my friend Karma, who lives in Owings. Her kitchen was the typical builder's orange oak, and we turned it into this beautiful Java finish. And it just gave her kitchen a whole new look. And she's loved it every day since we did it. We did it in her garage, so we were doing kitchen cabinet painting in a garage. But so those are the inspiration photos. Now I'm going to get over here in my little work area that I set up, and I'm going to talk about what it requires to paint a piece of furniture. Some of the things that you need for painting furniture are almost everything is available at a local hardware store or at one of the big box stores. The first thing that you have to do when you're working on furniture is determine what the current finish is. The current finish on this one is most likely lacquer. And the way to test that, there are a lot of times on a really old piece, it'll be some other kind of varnish or shellac. If it's lacquer, this is denatured alcohol. If it's lacquer, denatured alcohol will make it sticky, and it'll make it come off. And you can see that it's coming off, and I can touch it and I can feel it's getting sticky. If this were not lacquer, if this were some other finish on here, the denatured alcohol, if it were an oil-based finish, the denatured alcohol would do nothing to it. In that case, if it were an oil-based finish, like say maybe a polyurethane that somebody had put on, then you would want to use mineral spirits to clean and to dull the finish on that. A lot of times if you're doing something like that's been in your home a while, maybe in a kitchen or something, and it's going to have grease and that sort of thing on it, I use this, it's called a pre-paint cleaner and deglosser, and you mix it with water and you rub it onto the finish really good, and it'll take all the grease and everything off. It's a really good product to have on hand if you plan to paint, you know, like more than one piece furniture, not very expensive. But this will degloss, which will make a new finish grab onto your old finish really well. So a deglosser is good to have. It's also called liquid sandpaper, people call it. Denatured alcohol, I'm going to use that again in a minute. And I'm sure before we get started, I'm going to kind of go through some of the tools that I use. This is a little paint tray, and I don't know who invented this, but I think they invented it with painters and artists in mind. It's Glad Crescent Seal. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And what I do is I line my tray with the sticky side down. And you feel free to ask questions as I go along if you have questions. Line my tray with this crescent seal. Pour the paint in, and then when you're finished, you just wad it up, throw it away. You don't have to worry about cleaning the tray. And it's like really saved a lot of time for me as time goes on. That's one of my favorite tools that I have. Another thing that you can get at the dollar store is a spatula. It's really good for getting paint out of the can. And another thing that I use a lot, they make these little foam flat pads, and this comes in really handy if you're doing like a small area, or if you were doing a different color maybe on an area. This gives you a nice smooth finish. I love these little things. They come in handy for a lot of things. They also make a roller pad too. Let's see. One of the things that I always have on hand, I'm going to get some brushes out and show you some of the brushes that I use. Okay. These are called chip brushes. These are the ones that you pay, 50 cents for and you can throw away. But these are invaluable for doing things like, even if after I sand this, there's going to be a little bit of dust in the crevices. I just use a chip brush to wipe those crevices and get the dust out of the crevices. So chip brushes are something that's always good to have on hand. There's another one. I use angle brushes a lot. This one is rather stiff. It's not great for painting furniture, but it would be okay if you were putting on a primer or something. This one is it's called a silver tip, and it's made by, I don't remember who, it's made by Wooster, which you can buy either at Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore, I don't remember which. But it has very soft bristles, which is really important for painting furniture, because one of the things with painting furniture is you don't want to leave brush strokes. You want it to have a nice smooth finish so that it looks professional. This is a little corner brush that comes in handy. I don't remember. I think you can get these at one of the paint stores as well. This is another angle brush. This one has blue bristles and is a little bit thinner. This one is really good for putting on varnish or some kind of a top coat. This is a chalk paint brush. You can see how round and fat it is. It holds a lot of paint. Chalk paint is not my favorite. It was a fad for a long time, and people still use it. And there are a lot of people who make their living selling chalk painted furniture. But chalk paint is something that is very difficult to work with later on because chalk paint needs to be waxed or top coated. It's really difficult to top coat because it sucks up the top coat and it won't give you a nice smooth finish very easily. The main thing that they do with chalk paint, and the most famous one that people know is Annie Sloan. The main thing about chalk paint is you don't have to do a whole lot of prep work to use chalk paint. But once you put wax on something, you can't paint over it without removing the wax unless you use more chalk paint over it. Chalk paint will stick to about anything, but it does need to be top coated or protected in some way, and most people use wax to protect it. I personally don't like wax because it's very high maintenance. It shows marks, it shows fingerprints, it shows whatever you do to it, it's going to show if you put wax on something. So anyway, chalk paint is an option, but it's not my choice. Another brush that I always have on hand is an artist brush, and these brushes are called Simply Simmons. You can get them for around $3 at Michael's or an art store. This is a more expensive brush, but it has very, very, very fine, smooth bristles, so it's really good for putting down a fine finish. So I always keep an artist brush handy when I'm working on furniture. So that pretty much covers the brushes. Anybody have any questions so far?
You didn't show the wire brush one.
Oh yeah. Well, I had this out, but I didn't show it, so I'll show you now. This is my favorite tool for cleanup for brushes. I'm very particular about my brushes. I do not like paint to harden in my brushes. I don't like it to get up near, this is called the ferrule. I don't like it to get up here because it makes the bristles separate and it won't give you a nice smooth finish. So, and another trick that I'll talk about while I'm doing this right now, if you're working with water-based products, always dampen your brush before you put it into a water-based paint product. And that way the paint won't stick in the brush quite so much, and it'll be easier to clean when you go to clean it because the bristles will already be damp. But I use a wire brush to clean my brushes, and it really does a really good job. And the product that I use to clean, I forgot to bring out here, but the product I use to clean my brushes is Murphy's oil soap. People know it from a long time ago. They used to clean their kitchen cabinets with it. They used to clean wood floors with it. It does a great job. It'll even soften hardened paint if you leave a brush in it overnight. Murphy's oil soap is what you need to clean your brushes. Speak up if you have any questions. The next tool I'm going to talk about is sandpaper. If you're going to totally refinish, like take off a whole finish off of something, you want to start with a coarse grit sandpaper and work up to a higher number grit. This is 100 grit. It's very, very rough and very textured. And that would really put marks on this little piece of furniture that I'm going to work on today. And I don't want marks on this furniture, so I'm not going to use 100 grit. But if I were going to sand a top completely off and it had paint or something on it, I would start with the lowest number grit, which would be the coarsest. And then I would gradually work up to a higher number grit. This one is, let's see, where's my 220? Okay, these are 220. That was 100. This is 220, so it's a little bit less coarse than that, but it's just perfect for what I'm going to do to this little bench / table that I got to show you how to do today. So I would start with the 220 on here, and then I will then I'll proceed up to a 320 grit, which is even smoother, so it'll give me a nice smooth finish to work on to start with my painting. Sandpaper is very important. The next thing I'll talk about, if I wanted to do this in 2 different colors, I would want to take off some areas so that the color didn't bleed into, say, if I wanted to paint the legs a different color than the body of it. Here are 2 kinds of tape not to use when you're painting furniture. plain old masking tape and this blue painter's tape. Don't use either of those to paint furniture. These are what are called crepe tapes, and they have a little bit of a texture to them, and they do not have they will not give you a sharp edge unless you really, really, really work really hard to push them down. So don't use those kind of tapes. If you're going to do a piece of furniture and you were going to do something in 2 different colors, I would use this either frog tape. Frog tape makes this yellow tape, which is has a real smooth finish, give you a real sharp edge. And 3M also makes one that's a smooth one. It's now, I think the color of it now is lavender. But, if you're going to use tape for furniture finishing, make sure you use something that's a good quality. Don't use a cheap tape. And I'll show you how I'm going to use that later on. I'll tape off something so you can see what it does. Another tool that I always have on hand is these terry cloth towels, and I use these, and they'll get paint on them, and I just throw them in the washer and wash them in hot water, and then I can use them over and over again until they get so crusty I can't use it anymore. If I'm sanding, I do use a mask. This one helps filter out small particles. I don't want to breathe in all those particles. Another thing, if you're going to do a big piece of furniture like that silver dresser that I just did, this little palm sander comes in handy. And the same thing goes with that. You want to start with your coarser grit sandpaper and then work up to a higher number grit sandpaper if you're using a sander. Some people automatically think that steel wool is something you need for furniture finishing. The only time you use steel wool when you're finishing furniture is if you're using oil-based products. If you use this with water-based products, you'll end up with rust in your finish because there's ammonia in the water-based products, which will oxidize with the steel wool, the little hairs that end up on your piece. And you'll end up with little bits of rust in your finish. So never use steel wool when you're working with the only time I use steel wool when I'm finishing a piece of furniture is if I'm totally finished and I want to just smooth out the top coat a little bit or give it a little bit more patina, then I'll use steel wool at the very end, but I can't put anything over it again once I've used steel wool on it. I always have some little cups or little containers nearby. These little deli cups are really great because you can put a lid on them. If you pour your paint in here, you can put a lid on it, come back and work with it later. They're really handy to have. I buy a whole bunch of these from Restaurant Supply so that I always have them. Another thing that's good to have are those Mr. Clean Magic Erasers, but you want the original one, not the one that has the cleaner in it. Those are handy too. All right, now we're going to get into the fun stuff, the products. Has anybody painted furniture before? Is everybody muted?
I took a class and Martha was maybe 21. It's been that long ago at the high school that I finished several pieces.
Oh, okay. Things have changed a lot since then.
Sure.
I bought a piece when we lived in Korea. It was an old-fashioned rice chest.
Mm-hmm.
We painted it. We had no idea what we were doing, but it made a nightstand.
Yeah, there you go. So I have a few favorites that I can recommend these days for ease of painting furniture. I like to say chalk paint is okay for some applications, but it's not my favorite. It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't give you a nice hand when you feel it. I just don't like the wax feel that you have when you have to wax a chalk paint. There's a product now that's called Fusion Mineral Paint, and the Fusion Mineral Paint has it has the trying to think of the same, one of the same minerals in it that chalk paint has in it. But this is available. Is everybody familiar with the Bunting auction place in Dunkirk by Dunkirk Hardware? There's a lady in there that actually sells this in there, and it goes a long way. This one little pint, I've already done 2 pieces from this one little pint of paint, and that's what I'm going to use on this today. I'm going to use that Fusion Mineral paint. You see one thing that I've done here is I put a piece of plastic. I try to do that when I have a jar. This one's not opening very easily, but there we go. If you put a piece of plastic inside your jar lid before you close it back up, it'll be much easier to open it, and you won't get all the paint around the edges, so that it won't get stuck. And it will seal better, so you don't get air in here. That's one trick that I try to adhere to. I even do it on cans occasionally, because cans can rust if you leave paint around the edges. And when you open a can of paint, a good thing to do, especially if it's a quart and you're just going to use maybe a little bit of it, take your brush and clean out the whole inside of the lid of the paint, and then wash the lid, rinse it off like under the hose or in your laundry sink or whatever, and get all of the paint out from it around the crease where it's going to go back into the paint, and then wipe around the inside of the lid, so that when you put that lid back on, you have your piece of plastic in there, you're not going to have all that paint build up around the edges, and your paint will last longer and it won't be contaminated as easily. If you were working on a raw wood piece of furniture, a lot of times when you buy like the natural furniture, it's done with something like pine. If pine has knots in it, those knots have what are called a tannin that will release over time, and the ammonia in a water-based paint will make those tannins, wherever there's a knot, those tannins will turn your paint a yellow color. So if you've ever seen like yellow dots sort of arise after you've painted something that had knots in it, that's what happens. And the way to avoid that is to actually seal those knots before you put a water-based product on them. And this is actually regular shellac, but they make one that's called a sanding sealer, that's actually colorless. This one is amber. There's actually one that's called clear. And this is alcohol-based. It's not oil-based. It's alcohol-based, so it will actually seal any knots, and you won't have that bleed through of the tannins, so you won't have those yellow circles appear on your furniture if you're working with a raw wood piece of furniture. Another thing that I like to do is I'll get a piece of molding and I'll try out different colors on it to see which one is really going to be the best to work with. This actually is something I did this as a sample for a client who was looking for something, but I don't know if you can see those very well, but I just taped off areas and did different colors on there so I could see which color was going to be the best. And this is the same kind of thing. I have 3 different colors of white on here just to see which one. One of them has a glaze, one does not, and one is just a pure white. So. All right, anybody have questions, comments? Okay, before I get started on this, I just wanted to show you a couple of products that are available. And I'll come closer to the camera so you can actually see what they look like. Okay, so there's a place in Annapolis called Maryland Paint, and it's on Chinkapin Round Road. And they sell this product, which is called General Finishes Milk Paint. And the milk paint is sort of like chalk paint, but it doesn't have to be top coated. It'll give you a more durable finish if it is top coated. And they make a top coat that's base for that's made to go with this. But the milk paint works really well. That'll give you a nice finish. You can buy this one in just about any store that carries paint anymore. This is made by Rust-Oleum. It's called Chalked, and it's a chalk type paint. But this one, unlike the real chalk paint, like the Annie Sloan that was originated in England, this one does not actually have to be top coated either. The good thing about this is that it does give you a nice smooth finish. It's a little bit more, it's a very matte finish, but it's a little bit more durable than regular chalk paint. And I mentioned the Fusion Mineral Paint. This is really a really nice paint. It goes on smoothly. It's not too thick to work with. I really like that one. But the one, if you were going to do, say, kitchen cabinet or a table that got a lot of use, or a bathroom vanity, something that needs to be durable, this is my favorite. This is my go-to. This is made by Benjamin Moore. It's made for cabinetry. It's made for durability. It's called a waterborne alkyd paint. So it's not strictly a water-based paint. It has oil suspended in it, but it cleans up with water. It's called Advance, Benjamin Moore Advance. The nice thing about this paint is that when you put it on your surface, it levels nicely, which means that your brush strokes will sort of disappear. You never want to use a roller when you're working on furniture, unless it's something like that big piece of furniture that we did. And then you want to use a roller that has what's called flocking on it. It has like a velour surface to it. Those little foam rollers that you can buy that don't have that velour surface on them, they will just give you air bubbles, and your bubbles will stay. They won't go away. So never use a roller when you're painting furniture. But Benjamin Moore Advance is my favorite. The only thing, you can't be in a hurry with this paint. This paint requires 16 hours between coats. You have to let it cure for 16 hours before you can put a second coat on. The nice thing, unless you were going to do, say, a glaze or something over it, the nice thing is that it does not require any kind of a top coat over it. So it doesn't have to have a clear top coat put on it. So the Advance is, and they sell it at Sunderland Paints right there near the church on Dalrymple Road. Donnie's real good about fixing me up with paint. So the Advance is one of my favorites. I use this for bathroom vanities all the time. People call me all the time to redo their bathroom vanities. You know, they have the orange oak bathrooms that sort of came with the house, and now they're tired of it, or they've changed their decor. Well, this is what I use on those vanities, and it's a lifesaver. I really love it. The only like I say, the only thing is I have to wait, I have to come back a couple of days in a row. One day to prep, one day to paint, and one day to put the second coat on, but it gives a really nice finish.
Is it basically a water-based cleanup? I mean, is it?
Yes, it is. Yep, it's all, you can thin it with water, you can clean it up with water. It's just, like I say, it has what they call, it's called a waterborne interior alkyd. So it has like an alkyd paint suspended in a water base. So it's a really, really good paint. Benjamin Moore Advance, remember that one. If you don't remember anything else today, remember that. Okay, you might want to change the camera a little bit, Steve, so they can see what I'm doing here.
How's the,
point it down a little more towards the piece. Is that better? Can you see the table? Yeah, now my face is gone. Okay. All right, I'll sit. All right. Okay, so I've got this little table. There's a gentleman at the other end of Jewel Road who has a barn full of furniture. He goes to estate sales and auctions, and he buys furniture, and then he just has these barn sales. Well, lately he hasn't been able to do that, but he's been showing some of the pieces that he has on Facebook. So I actually contacted him to see if he had any little tables that I could use for this demo. And he showed me like 5 pictures of different tables, and they were all really cute, but this one kind of interested me. Actually, when I got over there, I found out that it's actually like a little vanity bench or an organ bench or something. It opens up, so that's pretty cool. This would make a nice little table for next to a chair if you wanted to keep magazines or your remote control or something in there. It's a really cute little table. Now I'm going to show you exactly all the steps that I'm going to use to get this started. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my mask because I'm going to be standing a little bit. And I'm going to start with my, my 220 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to do the top today just to show you what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to go with the grain of the wood. Always go with the grain of the wood. And you can see how the finish is just sand it away there. Okay, so I'll wipe that off. Now, if I were going to do the legs, I would just wrap it. You don't have to pay quite as much attention to the detail, because when you do when I use the denatured alcohol on here, it will dull the surface enough that it will still grab the paint. Okay, I did the 220 grit, and I've already determined when I used the denatured alcohol before, I'd already determined that this is lacquer-based finish. So I know denatured alcohol is going to dull this finish enough so that when I put paint on here, it won't just peel off. Now I'm going to do the 320 grit. I actually take a whole sheet of sandpaper, I tear it into thirds, and then I fold each of those thirds into thirds to make it a palm-sized piece of sandpaper. That way you're not wasting sandpaper, and you have 3 sides that you can work with. So if I were doing a big piece, and this got, kind of dull and wasn't as sharp anymore, I could just refold it and have a new piece, and then I refold it again and I have a new piece. So that's the best way to use sandpaper. And then I get my trusty terry cloth. Let me wipe this off. I can take my mask off. Okay, so I get my terry cloth towel, and somewhere around here I have some gloves. Everybody knows what masks and gloves are these days, don't they? I already had some in stock, so I didn't have to take any away from anybody. Okay, so I pour some denatured alcohol onto my cloth, and I'm just wiping the top of this where I just sanded. It does 2 things. It cleans it. Actually does 3 things. It cleans it, it dulls it, and it also takes the sanding dust off. Okay. Now you can see how dull that is, how it doesn't shine anymore. That means that when I put the paint on there, that paint is going to stick really well because it's got a nice tooth to it. Okay, we'll take a popular vote. I'm going to end up probably selling this piece, but would you rather have me paint the top portion of this navy blue, black, or white?
Navy.
Navy? How many votes for navy?
I say navy blue.
Navy.
All right, navy it is. Now this is the Fusion mineral paint that I'm using. I also have a dark blue in the Advance. This one's not quite as dark as this one is. So I'm going to use the Fusion mineral paint because I don't feel like waiting 16 hours to put another coat on for that one. And I'm going to show you the proper way to apply paint so that you're not pulling paint off as you're putting paint on. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some paint into a container. Pour some paint into a container because if I work out of the container, then there's a chance that I can contaminate that paint and it won't be any good for another use. Here it is. Now remember I told you to lightly dampen your brush. That way you're not dipping your dry brush into the paint, so the paint's not, the bristles aren't acting like a magnet for the paint, and it'll be easier to clean your brush when you're finished. Okay, now because I'm putting a dark color over top of a dark color, I do not need to prime this. If I were going to put a light color over this, like a white, I would need to put a primer over this. And the primer I would use is called a bonding primer. There's one made by a company called XIM that makes a really good one. Bonding primers will stick better, they will last better, and they'll give you a smoother finish than, say, the Kills kind that you can buy. Those are not really the best primers. They don't level as nicely. The bonding primers will level a lot better, and they'll leave you a lot less brush strokes and things. So, okay. So now I've put my paint into my container, and I'm going to start by going near the edge. Okay. Now, if I were to, another thing to remember is that the tips of your bristles are what need to do the work, not the flat part of the brush. You don't want to lay your brush down and do that because that's not using your brush properly. You want the bristles, the tips of the bristles to do the work. Okay, so I have put on that. Now I want to make sure that I don't have a big buildup on the edges, so I'm going to keep track of that. But always remember to go from dry into wet. You don't want to go from wet into dry. You start that way, but then each time you start a new section of painting, you want to go into the wet, and that way your brush strokes will disappear. If I were to go this way, I'm pulling paint back off. So I want to always go from wet, from dry into wet. So I'm starting again. I'm always going dry into wet all the way across. And keep in mind whenever you're using acrylic paints, they always dry darker than they go on. So you can't really judge what it's going to look like until the paint is actually dry. Acrylic paints always dry darker. Oils don't have that much of a color change, but there are so few oil paints that people use anymore that acrylic is really the main product to use. Now, I don't know if you can see how smooth that finishes. The light's not the greatest, but and remember, I don't want to get a buildup along the edge, so I'm going to keep track of that. I don't want to get a big blob of paint right along the edge there. And I want to overlap each section. Some of the pictures that I showed you earlier, I used a water-based stain on. And the water-based stains, there's a company called Old Masters that makes a really nice gel stain that you can, actually General Finishes makes a gel stain too. But there's Old Masters makes a really nice water-based gel stain. If you just wanted to, say, maybe darken this to like a Java color or something, if you didn't like this sort of mahogany color, and you wanted to make it a Java color, you could use a gel stain on that instead of painting it if you still like the wood to show through. Now, if this were a dresser or a larger piece of furniture, I would have already taken off the hardware. That's one of the first steps you want to do. And if it's a dresser, you want to see if you can take the drawers out and work on the drawers separately. Now the paint, the water-based paint dries a lot faster than you would expect it to. So you don't want to go back into what you've already done unless you have, like a really good reason to do it. So you just want to stop before you think you're finished. Now, say if I wanted to paint this bottom section a different color than the top, maybe I want to do the bottom a white or an off-white or maybe a gray or something like that. What I would do, and fortunately, this one I can open the top up on, which is helpful. So I would tape along the edge all the way around so that when I was painting the blue part, I'm not getting the blue paint where I'm going to put the white paint. So I would have already taped all that off, gone all the way around with that. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and paint this whole thing navy blue. But what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to do some sort of a design on the top or a stencil. And another thing that, like I say, I have on hand is I always have an artist brush handy. Those come in really good for doing small areas. Has anybody else painted furniture before?
Have I painted it or have I painted it well?
Have you painted it?
Sure, I've painted it, but it didn't turn out as nice as I had hoped.
Oh, is that right?
I have a dresser that I have repainted at least 3 or 4 times. It was first, I think it first was orange and yellow, and then it was green and blue, and then it was red with a kind of a vintagey grain through it. So,
like Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, huh?
yeah, it went with whatever bedspread was going on at the time.
When Rachel was going to college, we painted a desk and a nightstand, like teal blue. And I don't even remember what kind of paint it was, but we sanded it down and then painted it. But she's not, is she using it now?
I think it's here. Well, she might have one of them.
Maybe one
One of
piece.
them's here and one of them's there, I think.
Oh, and we did a chair too, and then made covered a piece of foam to put on the seat. So it looked okay. I don't know how professional it was, but it served the purpose.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
A college apartment doesn't need that much fancy furniture.
Okay, so you can see I have a coat of paint on the top here. That's all I'm gonna do right now. Fusion Mineral Paint also makes a wipe-on poly that I have used. This is a matte finish, but if I were gonna top coat this, I would use something that was made by maybe Valspar or one of the regular water-based polys that you can get. Do not use oil-based poly over paint. Oil-based poly has linseed oil in it, and it will turn anything that you put it on yellow. It's only meant for wood. So do not use oil-based poly on anything that you paint. If you're gonna paint it with a water-based product, make sure you use a water-based top coat on it. This will get another coat of paint, and it'll get a top coat of some description. I'm not sure which one it'll be yet, but it depends. I might even add, there's a company called Modern Masters that makes metallic paints. I might even add a little bit of gold on here because this might sell downtown Annapolis to people who are interested in the Naval Academy. So I could do blue and gold. But anyway, I guess that's about it unless somebody has some questions. I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's been an hour. So I hope I gave you enough information to get you started. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you'd like to either email me or give me a call.
Now, is this a water cleanup?
It is.
It is.
I've got a bucket of water here, and I'm cleaning my brush as I'm speaking.
Okay.
Get my little steel brush here, and there's my brush, all nice and clean. So,
Deb, how long does it take for this coat to dry?
this one I can probably recoat in a couple hours. One rule of thumb is to put the back of never touch a painted surface that you're going to paint over again with the palm of your hand because there's oil in your hand and it'll make paint resist. So always touch with like your knuckle or something. If it still feels cool to the touch, then it's not ready to be painted over. So make sure that let it dry thoroughly, and usually it'll tell you on the container what a good time frame is to recoat something.
And you wait longer? Could you wait until tomorrow?
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
It's just that you can't do it too soon.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, the thing with doing it too soon, especially with this advanced paint, this one you have to wait at least 16 hours.
Yeah, 16 hours.
But any other water-based product like the milk paint or this fusion mineral paint or chalk paint, as soon as it feels warm to the touch, as soon as it feels room temperature, it doesn't feel cool, and it's not sticky at all, then it's okay to recoat it. Like say, I could probably recoat this. This is a nice thin coat, so I could probably recoat this in a couple hours safely.
Did you thin that, or did it come right out of the can?
It was right out of the bottle.
Oh, yeah, right out of the bottle. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes, like with this milk paint, I thin it about 10% with water, and it goes on a lot more smoothly. The same thing with these chalk paint products. I thin them about 10% with water, and I always pour it into another container anyway. So if I'm putting a half a cup of paint into a container, then I know I've got 8 ounces, so I want to put a little bit less than an ounce of water in that, and then I stir it up, and that'll give me it'll go on a lot more smoothly.
Do you use a chalk paint? You said it's not used much.
There are a lot of people that swear by chalk paint because you don't have to prep the furniture so much,
Uh-huh.
and it'll pretty much stick to anything. But chalk paint has to have some sort of a coating over it. And
Okay.
most of the time with chalk paint, it's wax, and I just don't like wax because once wax is on something, the only thing that you can go over it again with is chalk paint.
Okay, thank you.
Because you have to take, if it has wax on it, if you wanted to paint it with something else, you have to completely remove that wax with mineral spirits before you can even begin to think about putting another coat of paint on there.
Interesting.
Deb, I have a question.
Okay.
Do all of the paints have right on the label what the room temperature range can be for painting, so you don't have it too hot or too cold for painting?
There very rarely is it going to be too hot. Most paints, you don't. Some paints, well, if it's a house paint, like a wall paint, it'll give you a temperature range. Most paints, you don't want to paint below 65 degrees. If it's below 65 degrees, that hinders the dry time, but it also makes the skim coat that forms on the paint, it doesn't cure properly. So never paint anything when it's below 65 degrees. I like to be in the 70, 75 degree range, just, to be safe. Sometimes I've had to work in adverse conditions, but 65 is like my limit for the low temperature.
Okay, thank you.
That humidity, how's that?
Yeah, humidity, if it's really humid, it just makes the paint take longer to dry. The drier the air is, the more it's going to evaporate, so it'll dry faster. Some paints you do not want to rush. Some people will use like a hair dryer, to make this dry faster, and I've done that on occasion. But when you're using a paint that's made for furniture, you want to let it cure properly on its own. You don't want to try to rush it because it may not evenly cure. So you want to make sure you get a good cure on the whole thing.
Now, the paint that you poured into the cup that you were using, will you pour that back into the can, or will that now go in the trash?
It will not go in the trash. Take my trusty press and seal. I'll go around that edge. And that makes it pretty much airtight. And then I have that paint to finish the rest of the piece with.
Okay.
I try not to pour out more than I'm going to use to finish whatever I'm using it for. It's better to have to pour more in than to waste paint.
Right.
Sense.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
I have a question in the room here. What's the difference between gel and paint?
Gel stain.
Well, sometimes I ask what kind of paint or whatever, and you say it's a gel.
There's something called gel stain, and gel stain is basically a translucent stain that you can do over top of another finish. So you'll still be able to see what's underneath it. It goes on thinly. You have to put it on in thin coats. You don't want to put it on thick coats or else it'll just kind of get floppy. Gel stain can be made in an oil-based product. It's also made in a water-based product. I like to use the water-based products. If you're going to use a gel stain on raw wood, it will definitely raise the grain, so you're going to have to sand it back, and you might have to apply it a couple times, so you want to take care not to apply it too thickly so you get an even coat over your whole thing. If I were going to do what I call a glaze, you see how this has different, there are some areas that are lighter and some that are dark.
Mm-hmm.
I've used what's called a glaze over this. I don't think I brought any out here with me. A glaze is something that you add pigment to so that you can lay that over top of another color. And when you lay that over top of the other color and you brush it out evenly and very thinly, then you can still see what's underneath, but it gives it more depth.
That's actually what I meant to ask.
Oh, okay, yeah. Steve said he meant to ask about glaze, not gel.
Do you ever use spray paint on furniture like that?
Nope.
No. Okay.
I will spray this paint through a sprayer. I have a spray gun that I use. I can spray like this Advance. I've used that on cabinets and that sort of thing. I also have a proprietary product that I use by a company called Faux Effects that I use a lot. But like the kind that you use in a spray can really is not the best choice. It will not give you, they're not made to give you an overall even coat. They're made for small projects really.
Okay.
Plus, once you put that on, those are definitely oil-based. Once you put that on, you can't paint a water-based product over that without either dulling it or removing it somehow. Any other questions?
Thank you so much.